Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be presenting this workshop for you on basic yard makeovers. And now that the weather has started to cool a little bit, at least in the evenings and mornings, we feel more like getting outside and doing something after a long, brutal, hot summer. So I'm going to tell you just briefly a little bit about myself. As Drew mentioned, let's get to this slide. I'm actually a certified arborist, and I'm also a master gardener through the University of Arizona Extension Office. And I previously worked here at the Chandler Water Conservation Office and had a great time interacting with residents and helping them with their water use. But of course, today we're going to be talking a little about what to do with a yard, and can you remodel it and make it more functional and maybe even save a little bit of water. And regardless whether you have grass or not, I think a lot of the information in today's presentation is going to be relevant. So you'll hear us talk about removing grass, but if you don't have it, don't feel like we're picking on you, because you can still have a nice looking landscape even if you don't take out your grass. As Drew mentioned, there are some class materials that were available to you prior to the class. If you didn't receive them, you can still download them now. But the first one is just a class summary on the basic yard makeovers. There's also a resources list, and I'll be referring to this as we go through the presentation. Another handout is converting to Xeriscape, which just tells you basically how to, the step-by-step process. 10 landscape tips. And these are great when you're trying to remodel a yard. It kind of tells you, what to do step by step. There's also a design checklist. So whether you're starting with a small project or you're redoing your entire yard, it's good to write it all down and get some ideas on how you want to use the space. Think of every possible, your wish list, every possible thing that you want in a yard and to make it functional for you. And then you can break it down into pieces depending on your budget or your time. And you can do a small portion this year or maybe in the next 6 months, and then move on to another portion if you want to break it down. There are also brochures available. These are available online, and the web addresses are on the resource list, or they're available in hard copy from your local water conservation office. Some libraries also have these. The conservation offices stock their libraries, and even city halls. So these are some of the brochures that are available. Landscape Plants for the Arizona Desert has over 200 low water use plants that you can try in your yard. Has pictures of each of them, as well as some characteristics, how big they are and how much water they take. Landscape watering by the numbers. Those of you that took the irrigation class probably already have this one, but watering, of course, is of utmost importance here in the desert, and we need to do it correctly so that our plants look their best. And then the Xeriscape book, it's kind of a design guide, has some great pictures of plant combinations and some color combinations that should help you as you create your landscape. Now, some of you that took the Color Your World class may find slides that you've seen before in the presentation, and that's fine. It'll just be a reminder. But for those of you that are new to this, I wanted to include them so that you get kind of an overall view of the possibilities of what you can do in a landscape. There are some reasons to convert a yard to Xeriscape. Some of these are pretty logical. You can save time, save water, save money, Save the air with gas-powered equipment that's generally used for mowing or trimming. You can set an example for your neighbors. And probably the one that most people think about is they don't have to mow their grass anymore. So did you know that, now this is an average, not for this year, obviously, we average 8 inches of rain a year, and a lawn requires over 60 inches. So we'd have to live in a place that rained a lot to provide the water via Mother Nature for our lawns. And lawns are often overwatered. Sometimes, 2 to 5 times, 2 to 3 times is probably more general than they really need. So, and if you convert, a xeriscape uses half to 2/3 less water than grass. So that's a pretty significant savings. So here's a little comparison. This is for a 3,000 square foot lawn. Yours may not be that large, but the water needed for that size of lawn is about 105,000 gallons. That's assuming you don't overwater. And the same size xeriscape only needs about 44,000 gallons. We live in a desert, although sometimes when you're in the middle of the city, it's hard to remember that we're surrounded by desert. Here's kind of what the Metro Phoenix Valley looks like from downtown on the top of South Mountain. And here's just a few facts. Those of you that were here during the summer, if you escaped, I'm jealous, but if you were here during the summer, now this is a 20 to 30 year average. So 110, guess what that is? Those are days with temperatures over 100 degrees. That's so hot. However, this year we broke some records, and we had 130 days at least with temperatures over 110. So I guess you could say that's super hot. And for us, we can move indoors out of the heat and be comfortable, but for plants, they're stuck out in their environment, and it can be pretty brutal, pretty hard to cope with that amount of heat. This is the most recent image from the U.S. Drought Monitor, and it's changed a little bit since the one I presented in the Color Your World class. It's actually gotten worse. But if you concentrate on Arizona and where the two little horizontal blue lines connect, that's the Salt and Gila River. And that's just about where Phoenix is. And that dark maroon blob right over that area indicates that that's exceptional drought. Most of the state is just an extreme drought, just extreme, but we're exceptional. In fact, the whole Southwest is pretty dry at the moment, and hopefully this winter we'll get some relief. So just another reminder why we should use desert adapted plants rather than those that are imported from other areas. So what does xeriscape mean? It's a made up word, and it's derived from the Greek word xeros, meaning dry, and scape, like in landscape or a scene. So together, xeriscape. But it's a funny word too. People often mispronounce it. It's that X that throws you off every time. So here's a few tips on how you can remember to pronounce xeriscape. So it comes from xeros, meaning dry. Xeric environments are deserts. Xerophytes are desert plants. Xerox, that one's pretty familiar to everyone. That's a dry copy. And then xeriscapes are dry landscapes. So don't look at the X and don't let it throw you off. It's pronounced like a Z, xeriscape. This is not a xeriscape. This is a xeroscape because there's nothing growing in this yard. So this is not what we want to encourage you to create. This is more what we have in mind. Something that's colorful and interesting, doesn't use a lot of water, might attract some native wildlife like butterflies and hummingbirds. Here's another one. Xeriscapes come in many different forms. And another, we have a Palo Verde tree here with some ground covers. All desert adapted plants. And another one. Even a pool or in a small lawn area are appropriate in a xeriscape. And this image shows you some layers. We've got of course, the lawn layer, and then we have ground covers with shrubs being another layer, and then the trees being a third layer. Another xeriscape. This one is in the middle of downtown Phoenix. And instead of fences, they used large oleanders to define the property lines. But this homeowner took out some grass and added some xeriscape, wanted to preserve the natural feel of the area and the historic feel. The principles of xeriscape include, of course, planning and design, appropriate turf, efficient irrigation, grading and soil evaluation, using mulches. Now, these can be either granite mulches or organic mulches like wood chips or things like that, organic mulch. Low water use plants, and then appropriate maintenance. So throughout much of the year, we can extend our living space to the outdoors. And this should be appropriate to your home's architecture, your lifestyle, and of course our region, and even your budget. When you're creating a landscape, don't forget color. And we covered this in depth in the Color Your World class. I just threw the color wheel in here to remind you that there are lots and lots of color choices, both in the flowers of plants and the leaves. The hot, warm colors include red, orange, and yellow. And they, of course, aren't hot to the touch, but they trick your mind into thinking hot. And in contrast, oops, wrong one. This is an illustration of those warm colors. We've got the reds. And in contrast, the cool, calm colors include blue, green, purple. And again, it's not because they're cool to the touch, but they trick your mind into being influenced and thinking that it's cool and calm, peaceful. Sort of like this landscape. It's kind of muted colors with a splash of yellow down the pathway. So if you're thinking about converting or even starting from scratch for that matter, there are some things you need to do. You need to have a plan. If you have grass, then of course you'll need to kill it or remove it. Grading your yard. You may find that you need to rework the irrigation system. And then finally planting and mulching, followed by maintenance, and then just enjoying the landscape that you created. So we're going to cover these steps in the next part of the program. So having a plan. I know everyone, you get anxious and you want to get things done, in a hurry. But it is better to have a plan of action before you go out and try and get started. So you can do a site analysis of your property, and I'm going to show you just quickly how to do that. You can create a needs and wants list. Use that design checklist that's part of your handouts to help you with that. There may be things you haven't even thought about that you'd like to include. It's helpful if you create a bubble diagram on paper, as well as outdoor rooms or areas. And then finally, you'll notice that selecting the plants is down at number 5. So you kind of want to wait on getting plants until you've done the other steps. And then installing the irrigation and installing the plants. So make a wish list, and these are just some things that you may want to include if you have children, or even if you're athletic, you might want to include some kind of play area or entertainment area. Maybe you just want to attract wildlife into your yard. Now, I'm not talking like pigeons. I'm talking native wildlife, butterflies, hummingbirds, and some of our native birds. Maybe you just want a quiet place to relax, or you need more color or shade. I think we all need more shade. Planting a vegetable or fruit garden. And if you don't have a pool already, maybe installing a pool or spa. So there are lots of different things that I haven't even mentioned here. The American Society of Landscape Architects did a survey a few years ago, and they had the categories on the left, the outdoor design elements, and within that were outdoor living spaces. And though they surveyed people, and what they wanted in their outdoor living spaces included what you see on the list here, grills and fireplace, fire pits, places to have seating or dining, outdoor lighting, water elements, and so on. So there are lots of things that are important to people, and they may be important to you as well. In the top 10 things to do to your landscape when you get started, this is what's on the list. And you have definitions or explanations of these on your handout. So grading the yard, using boulders, selecting your granite, the color and the size, grouping plants, you've got views, and of course themes, along with conservation and hardscape. We use a lot of hard things. We have concrete pathways and sidewalks, and we have, pony walls and fences considered hardscape, and there may be other things that you want to include. And then, of course, using flowers and native plants. There are even landscape themes. We had a handout in the Color Your World class, and if you want that handout, just send a note to Drew, and maybe he can get that posted so that those of you that are in this class can have it too. So it gives you the plants that you'll need to create, a Mexican, a Mediterranean, a tropical, and I think there was a native landscape. But you might also like these others, the rustic or formal or specialized areas. But you kind of have to be careful when you're selecting plants for your landscape. Don't just pick one of each kind, because it might end up looking like this picture. It looks like they've got one of a lot of different things. And many desert plants are very large, like the agave in the foreground. The laurels can get pretty large. So you have to keep that in mind as well. So there are some design rules to create or select a simple design. Decide on a main theme or a goal. You might want to use one or two focal points and not more than that. And have a short plant material list. Don't get one of everything. You can take pictures. You can use reference materials, reference brochures and books, or even create a Pinterest page where you can collect images of what you'd like to have in your yard. It can be very helpful. It's important to work with Mother Nature instead of against her, and using plants that like to grow here. Try to recreate a natural look. And in general, informal landscapes are usually, easier to maintain, and they don't cost as much. Try working with odd numbers of plants, so 3, 5s, and 7s, instead of just one here or, a couple over there. And you can easily use plants to frame views or even block views. This is an image out of that Xeriscape with Style, Landscaping with Style brochure. And it just has a lot of the things that we've kind of covered here previously. It's got layers, so it has ground covers, it has some taller shrubs, it has the tree canopies. It also has an interesting entryway, kind of invites you in. Some techniques to think about as you're developing your plan. Try tucking or massing plants together instead of just one stuck out there by itself. They generally look better when they're grouped with similar plants or the same type of plant. Leave some open space. As I mentioned earlier, some plants are really large and you may only need one. If you have raised planters, plants that spill or cascade over the edges are very effective. And this image kind of demonstrates some of what we were talking about. Of course, it's got some desert adapted plants. There's some open space. There's even a grass area. And you'll notice that the border of the grass is curved. And this is an important tool to use if you have a small space, because curved lines trick your eye into thinking that you've got more room than you have. The reason is because it slows your eye down. Instead of your eye moving fast along a straight line and maybe into a corner with a right angle, a curved line slows your eye and tricks your mind into thinking that there's more space. Instead of having a solid pathway or solid sidewalk, you can break it up into pieces. These are, I believe, flagstone pieces. Or if you have or want cement, try staggering the sections so that they look a little more interesting. Here they've taken pieces of flagstone and then in between they've used pieces of colored tile, which kind of creates a nicely, attractive pathway. And I love this one, although I'm not sure I'd have the patience to do this myself with all those tiny little stones. Or just simply a curved sidewalk, concrete sidewalk. You can also create the same idea with granite. Here they've got a little border, so it kind of contains the granite. And then they've used pieces of flagstone inside, which you may not even need to use. You could just have the granite by itself. This backyard has a lot going on and a lot of different things, a lot of different surfaces, but it works together. So off to the left, you can see the terracotta tile under the patio, and then the sidewalks in themselves, of course, are concrete. But under the patio set on the right, it's pieces of flagstone. So you can combine materials. You don't have to stick with the same thing. If you already have an existing surface, you can add something else to it. Or you can just use plain granite. This has two different sizes of granite. The pathway is done in quarter minus, which means that the pieces of granite themselves are approximately a quarter inch. Of course, they're not all that size, but quarter. The minus means it has smaller pieces in that mixture. And what it does, they kind of all net together and create a very firm surface to walk on. So for a site analysis, you can look at your house and your property, how your house sits on your property, think about your lifestyle, your surroundings, and the sun and the weather. We're just going to kind of skip through this fairly quickly. So here's a home footprint. You can create this for yourself. You can use just regular paper or graph paper and put your house's footprint on paper so you can decide where you want to place things in your landscape. There's some things to consider, which would be the sun angles, maybe the wind direction, how people move through your property, how water moves on or off your property. if you have views, and then the plant placement. So in the winter, on the left here, the sun has a different angle than it does during the summertime. And the angles are usually very low. That creates more shade on the north side of homes and other structures. So the blue indicates shade. Compare that to the summertime when the sun rises further in the north and stays mostly overhead rather than having a steep angle. So there's far less shade during the summertime on those north areas of homes or structures or fences. And some plants need shade, some plants need more sun. So just consider that when you're thinking about your plant placement. We're back to our home footprint, and I'm just going to throw some things in here quickly, such as the sun. I mentioned in the summertime, the sun kind of rises and sets in the northeast and northwest. In the winter, it rises and sets in the southeast and southwest. So the shade patterns are very different. Here's some pathways. Yours might be very different in your own footprint. And you can do these in concrete, or you can do it just in gravel, but just an open area so you can move through your property. I just threw some in here. And then when it rains, the water moves off your roof and goes somewhere. Some of it may stay on your property. Most lots are sloped so that the water runs towards the front or eventually reaches the front. And we can create areas that will slow the water down before it finally, empties into the street. If it ever rains again, we can do that. So the little dotted areas are just where the movement of the water. So these areas I was talking about where you can slow the water down are depressions, shallow depressions. And I've put a blue blob up here to represent that, and it's a few more in the landscape. Shallow depressions. This is not a pit. This is just a wide area. The soil that you remove from your depression, you can use to create mounds, so contouring mounds. It gives you a different elevation in your landscape, and that can help create interest. So there's a few of those. This is called a swale. Again, a shallow but wide depressed area in your yard that will collect rainwater, and it soaks into the soil. It shouldn't last for more than just a few hours. We're not trying to create a pond. And the shrubs and trees that are located nearby can take advantage of that water. Most people like a lawn area, so that's what I've added here. Trees on the east and west sides of your home are effective for shade. And then these other colored areas are just for groups of plants that might be wildflowers or plants that attract hummingbirds or butterflies. And then I'm going to throw in some colored or plants with colored flowers here in just a second. There we go. And because this house faces south, the backyard, gets a lot of sun in the summertime. So I've added plants that have those cool colors, the purples and pinks and greens and blues. You can have a few hot, warm colors, yellows and reds, but on those areas where you get a lot of sun exposure, if you use plants with those cool colors, it will, trick your eye into thinking it's cool or cooler, even when it's not. And here's a nice landscape that has some of the items that we discussed. So it's got a focal point, has that nice little kiva in the back. There's lots of different textures. There's a lot of different colors. It has curves. Even has some grass. And here's another one. Not quite as colorful. It might have been the time of year, but they've got a nice little bistro set, little table and chair set up there with a fountain, a bubbling fountain. You can create create special spaces for children, for entertainment. We'll just look at a few here. So what about pets? Some people have, dogs, and they need to have a special area for their pets, for entertainment, for exercise. That might be a bad word, but for exercise. How about recreation and relaxation? We can all use that. So when we are trying to design a space for children, it's important to have one where, of course, they can play and where we can see them. This is just a simple swing attached to a mature tree, tire swing. But for children, of course, it has to be have easy access, where we can keep an eye on them with high visibility, someplace that's secure and doesn't have any hazards such as pools. And it needs to have, of course, the available space to do this. The picture on the left has a tree house. Now, not all of you would have mature trees to create this. One thing the tree does, of course, is provide shade. But you can provide shade with the colorful sails, the fabric sails. Here's an area. This is what you might call a sandbox, although it's not a box, but it's filled with sand. These boys are playing. They've got their rocks. They've got wood, all kinds of things that boys like to play with. And they've also got water. They've got a hose. The upper left-hand picture, you see they've got the water running. This particular area, I'm going to go back a slide. See this kind of object in the left-hand side down by the youngster in the blue shirt? That's actually a pump. And it takes the water that filters through the sand and pumps it back up again. So this is like a recirculating pump. So they don't have the hose running, from the house. They're recirculating the water that's in this area. This is pretty clever. So they're not really wasting water. They're learning. And kids can use water to learn about how water moves, how it feels. They learn about gravity because water runs downhill, and even things like erosion. And they're having a good time playing, but they're actually learning. Don't forget using native plants. They're pretty tough. And even on the lower left, this is a desert milkweed, and this happens to be a larval food source for one of our most common butterflies. You can see the caterpillar there. He looks pretty funny, being with stripes there. But this is, I'll show you the butterfly. There she goes. This is they kind of look like a monarch, but it's actually the queen butterfly. Monarchs like milkweeds as well, but the one we see the most often here in the desert is the queen. Children, a lot of children have a disconnect with their environment because they're indoors a lot, they're on their computers or their iPads, and I've heard it referred to as nature deficit disorder. So by creating a place for children to play outdoors, we can help them learn about it. And this young lady has a little creature on her hand. Can you see it? I've got a close up here pretty soon, but this is a tiny little toad. And in the summertime, when we get monsoon rains, probably not this year, the toads will hatch and the eggs will hatch. And she happened to find one, so she's playing with it. And have you ever noticed in areas around your home, maybe you've got some soft dirt, where you see these sort of like inverted volcanoes that kind of look like a cone? This is actually the home of a little insect called an antlion. When I was a kid, we used to call them doodlebugs. And he lives in the bottom of the cone and waits for an unsuspecting insect to crawl into the cone, and they can't get out because the sides collapse. They look pretty fierce, but they're not very big. They're like less than half an inch, quarter inch. But he's got some pretty big pincers, and when an insect falls in the hole, he grabs them and eats them. Now, this is the larval form. The adult is actually this guy, who looks kind of like a little dragonfly. They're very delicate, but they're called ant lions. So you can take your children on an ant lion safari, see if you can find the cones, and then you might be able to see the adult ant lions. They sometimes fly around in the evening around your porch lights. A garden, an alphabet garden, is a great way to use, a space for a garden and also teach children at the same time. So you can see they've got the letters, they've got, chives and catmint, I for iris. I can't tell what the S is for, but it's a pretty clever way to teach them. Or you might want to create a salsa garden. So everything, all the ingredients you need for your salsa, you can plant and have the kids help you make it. A garden can have sensory as well. So, of course, the visual sensations. Some plants, when their seed pods dry, they pop open, so you can listen for that popping. Of course, smell by crushing a leaf or smelling the flowers or the leaf parts, and then of course tasting. Here's a pet-friendly landscape, and they've created some raised beds, so it kind of helps deter the dogs from getting in the beds. They have their own fire hydrant out there. You see that? And I think there's a little depressed area for water as well. But dogs tend to walk the perimeter of a landscape, so leaving that area open will allow them to do that without crushing your plants. What about entertainment? Here we've got a fire pit. This looks like a pretty young landscape, but that would be nice to use when the weather gets cooler. Or maybe you'd like to have something more like this with some patio furniture and a nice fireplace. Here's another example. And still another one. Another fire pit. And notice how they painted the wall, the little pony wall, that really, brings in that element of color into this landscape. This is the one I really like. It'll be my dream outdoor patio. And how about showing movies outdoors? That's great, especially in this time where we're trying to do the self-isolation, and here's a way to enjoy movies on a cool night. They even have blow-up movie screens that you can project on. For those small, narrow spaces between homes, usually they're not big enough to put a tree in for shade. But here's an idea from Steve Martino. He's an architect, and he just used these retractable awnings over this small area so that they can, be pulled back when it's nice out, or you can, of course, extend them to add more shade. What a great idea. You can create outdoor rooms, and here it is just a part of a patio where they've included some colorful pots and some patio furniture. Even the mirror on the wall makes it feel like a room. And here's an idea for recreation. They've got their own putting green and a little fire pit. Even exercise, a basketball court or a lap pool. and relaxation. We all need a bit of that. The sound of running water is very relaxing. And in some cases, it will help disguise or conceal traffic noise. So bubbling water is a great way to create relaxing area in your yard. Or even an outdoor pond. Now this is an enclosed ecosystem. It's got plants and fish, and it acts kind of like a pool. It has a skimmer, and it has a waterfall area that is also doubles as a filter. So this is, like I say, it's in a totally enclosed ecosystem. Here's a couple of nice Adirondack chairs. It's a cozy little place to relax. Another example where they've got a little kiva in the back with a bench. And how about a hammock? Now here in our climate, we would probably want to put some shade material over the top of this hammock frame. That would give us a little more use out of it. Here's some examples of focal points. This one just happens to be a little recirculating water pump. Another little kiva. Or even yard art. It can be very simple, like this example, or even this one. Or you could expand it to be, take up a larger area. And this is just an old piece of, a template where they cut out pieces of metal. This is what was left over. And don't forget the color. Now this wall actually conceals a pool pump. And if this were just, blocks, just, the concrete blocks, it wouldn't be very attractive. But since they painted it, got the bougainvillea growing over the top of it, it's very effective. More color. They use a variety here. And if you don't want to paint your house a different color, you can use the furniture. You can paint or purchase them in accent colors. Just think how much less interesting this would be if you didn't have the colorful cushions or the tablecloth, the colorful tablecloth. So just those little bits of color really make it pop. And most of all, have fun in your landscape. You can be whimsical and creative. If you've got, grandma's spoons and forks, here you can create a little flower or pinwheel, leftover tin cans. Or even if you've done some remodeling in the house, you could take the sink and use that as a colorful accent. Okay, now it's time to think about getting rid of the grass. And for those of you that have Bermuda, I don't know if you've tried to kill it in the past, but it can be pretty tough. One of the qualities of Bermuda is that it can survive here in our desert environment. It makes a great lawn, but when it becomes invasive into spaces where we don't want it, it can be a little challenge, a little tough to get rid of. And if you're going to convert, you need to thoroughly kill the grass, including the underground portions. And that's Bermuda grass not only has what you see that grows above ground, but it has stolons and rhizomes that grow below ground. And these can extend down to several inches to even deeper in the ground. And that's what makes it so hard to get rid of. You can use a lot of different methods. There's mechanical, you can dig down and try to remove it. You can use chemical products to kill it. There's a method called solarization that you can use. But I don't know if any of you have ever just decided to turn the water off to try and kill it, only to find out that next time it rains, it grows right back. It's just, that is not an effective way to remove Bermuda grass. So neglect really doesn't work. You can try solarization, and it's using clear plastic, not black, but clear. But you have to do it in the summertime. So right now we're kind of past that window. You would want to start this in June so that you can leave it on for 4 to 6 weeks and have it kill all the Bermuda, including the underground portions. The reason you want to use clear is because you want the grass to try and grow. What you're doing is starving it. It's trying to grow, but under the plastic, it gets hot, it heats up, and you want to kill any sort of residual part that might be trying to grow towards the light, and then the solarization will kill it. Or you can try strip or sheet mulching. And this is just layers and layers and layers of products, about 14 inches in total, that you put on top of the Bermuda. Again, you kind of starve it, but you keep it to try and keep it from growing back. You're using up all of its energy so that it just finally gives up. But as you can see, we've got, starting at the bottom, we've got some, a layer of manure, it could be mulch. There's newspaper and cardboard, and then about 8 to 12 inches of mulch, and then a layer of compost or manure. Some people even use carpet, old carpet, to use in sheet mulching, because assuming you're going to throw that part away eventually. And then eventually, once the grass has died, then you can just till this into the soil, as long as it's all organic. If you're using an herbicide, the goal is to have it absorbed by the plant and have it reach all the parts. So the roots, the rhizomes, the stolons in the case of Bermuda grass, and of course the leaves. For perennial weeds, kind of like dandelions or some of our other weeds that grow, it kills the root. But with Bermuda grass, there are some other underground portions as well. The bigger the leaf area, the more product, the more herbicide is going to be absorbed. So you want to leave the leaves on and not mow the grass and then apply it. You want to let them grow so that you've got some leaf surface area to apply to. Sometimes these products act slowly, and you may not notice a difference for a week to 10 days. In the case of some products, these systemic herbicides, they contain the active ingredient called glyphosate. And there are a number of products out there, starting on the left, that red bottle, that one I got at the home improvement store with the blue label, the blue sign. Most people are familiar with Roundup. And there are some generic products too. The Kills All, that's probably sold at different variety of different stores. In the orange bottle, that's the one that comes from the home improvement store with the orange sign. But they all have the same active ingredient, which is glyphosate. And if you read the label, it comes in different percentages. So I would recommend that you don't have to buy the Roundup because that's the brand name. It's fairly expensive. But if you use these other products that have the same ingredient, you'll probably save about half the cost, if not more. But look for the product that has the highest percentage of glyphosate. The highest I've seen is about 41%. So use in that way, it lasts longer. You don't have to mix as much of the concentrate with water, and it's just a better bargain, a better buy. But when you're applying, as I mentioned, you want to apply when the grass is growing and green and healthy. To do that, you may have to water. If you've tried not watering your grass in hopes that it would die, you may have to turn your water on for a while and get it growing so you have nice leaf area to apply to. You want to apply in the summer when it's warm. Now is still a good time. If you apply in the morning, then the plant is metabolizing all day and it can absorb the product more effectively. Of course, you want to avoid windy days, apply on a calm day. Because a lot of our land here is old agricultural areas, you may find that you have a plant growing in your yard called nutsedge, or some people call it nutgrass. And you can see it has the tall blades, and they're ribbed, kind of growing faster than the rest of the grass. That's nutsedge. Here's a close-up. It grows from an underground tuber, kind of like a mini potato sort of arrangement. Here's what the tuber looks like. And you can pull it, but if you don't get that tuber, it just grows right back. So there are a couple of products that you can add to your spray. If you're going to use a glyphosate product, you can add Manage or Sedge Hammer to your container, your spray container, and then you spray your grass and your nutsedge all at the same time, and it'll get rid of it. Now you may have to reapply if you're spraying your grass and you've waited, 10 days to 2 weeks. You'll probably see some of it die down. You want to keep watering because there may be some residual areas, maybe those you missed a little bit, and if the grass starts to regrow, then you can spot spray it again. So to increase the effectiveness of the herbicide product that you use, of course, water the grass, get it growing. Don't spray right after you mow. Wait. I would wait maybe even longer. Wait at least a week, and then you'll have more relief area. Spray in the morning. We mentioned that. Of course, don't spray before rain. We don't think we have that problem right now. If you add nitrogen to the tank, a liquid nitrogen, as a fertilizer, it encourages more growth and more metabolization, and the product will be absorbed a little better. But always, always follow the label instructions. You want to wear protective clothing. You want to wear, goggles. Always follow the label instructions. Now, there are some key words when you're using products like this. It has to do with toxicity. And so the words are caution, warning, and danger. And of course, if you have a choice, always choose the least toxic option. The way that people can be exposed to these hazards, of course, is orally. You want to be sure you wash your hands before and after mixing. You want to wear goggles because you can, the spray could get in your eyes, or even a respirator so you don't inhale it. Change your clothes after the application and wash them separately. But if you notice on the little image, it starts at the bottom with caution being just slightly toxic. So that's on the label. It'll say, it'll have a warning label, it'll say caution, or it'll say warning. So the next increasing risk would be warning. It says moderately toxic. The next one is danger, severe eye damage or skin irritation. And then the one on the top is highly toxic or danger. Now keep this in mind. So we've got caution, warning, danger, and then danger, poison. because a lot of people think, well, okay, I'll just use an organic method to kill my grass. And I have a list of some organic products that you might want to try, or, on the next slide. So now these are organic herbicides, and they've been certified by OMRI, Organic Material Review Institute. But notice that even with some of these products, you've got caution, warning, danger, the same keywords that we saw on the previous slide. So organic doesn't mean it's not dangerous. So be sure and follow those precautions of protective clothing and eyewear when you use these products. Okay, so you've killed your grass. Now what? Now what do you do? Well, if you're going to be digging, you want to first call Blue Stake. You can dial 811. They'll come out and mark your utility lines, because you don't want to be the one that runs into, an electric or gas line while you're remodeling your yard. So just play it safe. Call them 811. They'll come out and mark the lines. They don't mark your whole yard, but they usually mark where the lines run into your utility box. And sometimes we had some work done at our house, and I noticed they came out and marked where the lines actually went into the breaker box. So that was helpful. In general, where your utilities are at the curb, they generally just draw, or they create a straight trench right to your breaker box when they are constructing homes, because that's the least amount of digging, right? So you can imagine that it probably just takes a straight line. But to be sure, just have Blue Stake come out. It's free. Okay, so after your grass has died, you can scalp it close to the ground, or you can rototill it and then rake out the dead grass, or you could rent a sod cutter or a bobcat and remove 3 to 4 inches of the dead grass that's on top. Here's what that looks like. I'm going to have 3 pictures here. So first is scalping. And actually, you might even see this now, because a lot of landscapers are scalping the lawns for preparation for overseeding winter grass. So scalping is very dusty. You might want to have someone else do it for you if that's your choice, because it's a dirty job. Or you can rototill and then rake out the dead grass. Or you can rent a bobcat, and here they're scraping off the top, 3 or 4 inches of the dead grass that they killed. Now, sometimes this is the same project where the bobcat was in the previous slide. Sometimes you can take that grass where that you removed with the bobcat, and you can discard it, or because it's already dead, some people use it, they flip it upside down and use it for creating mounds, contouring mounds. You don't have to use it, but some people reuse it, repurpose it. Okay, next would be grading the yard. And you've got your 10 tips. And here, this is that same project. They're using the bobcat, and they're creating some contouring mounds. They're using the bobcat to, create some different elevations. And then raking it into the mounds that they were trying to create. You're gonna have to be careful with mounds, though. You don't want your yard to look like a cemetery. So you can make them, gentle. You can also create swales, so those places that are gonna slow down the water, collect a little water when it rains. And you can, at this time, you can also add some boulders, create a little interest in your yard. Here's their finished area. Now the dirt is still very soft at this point, so you can see their footprints where they've walked through it. If you had plastic, you might want to consider removing it. It has a way of working up towards the soil surface and looking pretty bad. It also doesn't allow water to penetrate into the soil or oxygen to reach the soil profile. So if you've got it, consider removing it. Even the landscape fabric is not, it was designed to prevent weeds, and that doesn't happen. The weeds just grow on top of it anyway. So even the landscape fabric is, you don't have to use that. By creating areas that are going to catch a little water, and then next time it rains, you may be able to satisfy your plants' water needs for at least a little while. And instead of letting it run into the street, if we had a little bit larger area here that would collect the water, and eventually, if there's a large rain, a big rain event, eventually it would spill over and hit the street. But maybe just get it to stop for a little while on your property. Here's an example of a home where they did some rainwater harvesting, and you can see the depression out in front. It's not a pit, it's just a wide area. They created the swale here, and of course that water will help water or help irrigate some of the surrounding plants. Now this is a residential example, but this is also done on commercial properties like this one, where they've taken the water that comes off the street and directed it into these areas where they have trees planted. This example is a parking lot, and you can see this blank area where I suppose at one time they may have had some trees in here, just a few are left, but it's really not very attractive. So they made a project out of it, and they created an area that will capture the water that runs off the parking lot, and then added some more landscape plants to create a very attractive landscape. So they've got a pathway down along the road, and you can see the little channel in the center. It wasn't a very wide area, so they couldn't make this too wide, but this channel in the center will collect the water. And here is it working. So now these mesquite trees are getting some rainwater, and even some of the little shrubs that are planted next to them. In Tucson, they do a lot of what they call curb cutting, where instead of leaving the curbs where they prevent the water from entering landscapes, they cut them so that the water drains. And this is one area where they have native plants installed, and when it does rain, then the water collects in there, and there's no other irrigation system, just the runoff from the road. Okay, what about reworking your irrigation system? If you've removed grass, you probably had a sprinkler system with PVC pipe, and there's really no reason to dig that all up if you don't have to. You can use the existing PVC as long as it's not damaged, it doesn't have any leaks, and you can convert it to drip. Of course, if you want to abandon it and put in a new system, then that's your choice. But you can see on the picture on the right, there are retrofit fittings that will convert your PVC pipe into drip. Now you'll have to add a pressure regulator after the valve in the valve box, because when you water with sprinklers, that's at full pressure, but drip systems are only designed to run at about 30 psi. So a pressure regulator will drop that pressure. here's a close-up of that fitting. So on the left is the end that gets glued onto the existing PVC pipe, and on the right is the compression fitting that your poly tubing goes into for your drip system. And if you're doing a yard remodel, then you might as well consider your irrigation system. If it has a good design, you're set to go. But if you've got a system where maybe you only had one valve watering everything, you can easily convert that into a system with 2 or 3 valves. This little diagram shows you what they call zoning. So they've got a zone in the orange that waters the trees, and the zone in red waters the shrubs. And they have another zone in the blue, which goes under the driveway. And I'm assuming maybe this is a garden area that they've got over there. So if possible, put your trees on a separate line from your shrubs. Each valve assembly runs about $30. So that's your valve, your filter, and your pressure regulator. And the rest of it is labor. So it's not too terribly expensive if you want to try it yourself, or if you want to have someone else do it for you, then of course that's your choice as well. It's a winter project. Now, this is step number 5. So plant it and mulch it. But think about your location and those shady areas and what plants can tolerate shade or what plants can tolerate full sun. I think about color. There are some great plant combinations, and some of these are shown in that Xeriscape with Style brochure. Remember where we live and use that sense of regionalism when you're installing your plants. And then, of course, if you want to create a wildlife habitat, then there are lots of plants that will attract either hummingbirds or butterflies or whichever you are thinking about. Our native plants are great, but we have lots and lots of plants that come to us from other desert regions throughout the world, and many of these are very well adapted. Here's one of our natives that's highly underused in landscapes. This is creosote, or Lariad tridentata. It has very aromatic leaves. The yellow, of course, are the flowers, and the fruits, the seeds, are these little fuzzy things. Now, in its native environment, in the desert, it's just a little green shrub, but these do really well in our landscapes as long as you don't overwater. You probably need to water them the first few months after installation, but after that, you can almost turn the water off. If you water too much, they become very large. And what about artificial turf? A lot of people talk about it, and it's kind of popular, and it has very good applications. But just remember that it is kind of expensive, and it gets very hot in the summertime during the day, hotter than asphalt. So if you have children or pets, they're not going to want to go out there during the day and play on it. It cools off at night, but it does get warm during the day. So just consider that. The city of Chandler has a rebate program. So if you remove your turf, you can get money back depending on how much you take out. And these are the categories. So from 1,000 to 2,000 square feet is 200. For every 1,000 square feet after that, then it's $200 per 1,000 square feet. The maximum is $3,000, and that's because this program also extends towards commercial properties. You can find more details on the City of Chandler website. All right, now it's time to enjoy your landscape. And if you've planted some things that are visited by native birds, you might get things like the Gila woodpeckers or mourning doves or our cactus wren. We have a dove that is kind of a city bird. It has a collar, the collar around its neck. It's feathers, but it looks like a collar, and it's called the Eurasian dove. They're more like a pigeon. They're kind of big too, but they're not native. And but our native plants should attract the native birds. And of course, for other pollinators. And who doesn't love hummingbirds and butterflies? You can do this. You just need a plan. Here are some before and after photos. Some of these you saw in the Color Your World show or class, but these are going to be new to some of you. This is a little home, of course, with those, it looks like a maybe glassed-in porch or room, at least out front, and pretty plain actually. But they did a little remodel, and now it looks like this. They have some ground covers, a few shrubs, and I'm sure they enjoy it much more than this grass. This home in Chandler had a major revision. They enclosed the carport, made a garage out of it. They took out all the grass in the front yard and converted it to xeriscape. So here's what it looks like now. This home is in Tempe. We have several slides from Tempe. They let us borrow their conversion pictures. And it had a major transformation. Keep your eye on the little, I can't think of the name of it, the little vigas, the little round wooden beams in front, because that's about the only way you can tell this was the same house. And here's another one, a small grass area, which they converted, so they don't have to mow anymore. They can still enjoy their patio. And small grass areas are very hard to water effectively. You get a lot of overspray, and as you can see in this picture, the sidewalk's getting a lot of water. So they took that out and put in desert adapted plants. Another home in Chandler, and this is a ficus tree that's up next to the home. They eventually took that out, but when they did their remodel, it was still there. So this is what it looked like prior to their conversion. So they took out the grass, and it looks like this. And another Chandler home. This one was at the end of a cul-de-sac, and the little wall on the far right, coming off the sidewalk, that's the division of the HOA property versus residential homeowner property. So the property owners did the conversion, and now it's very hard to tell where that property line is. It kind of blends in with the common area and makes their front yard look much larger. And this is the home where they did the conversion with the little bobcat taking out the grass. So this is kind of what the front of it looked like. And they did some conversion there. And this is their grass that was in the front yard. And that's an olive tree right there by the entrance. And that's what it looked like after they finished their conversion. So everything is very young, but you can see the finished product. And xeriscape is not just something that is common to our area. It's kind of throughout the Southwest. This is in Texas. And they had, this landscape had just ground cover. And they took it out and added plants that were appropriate to their region. Here's what it looks like after. So much more interesting. If you need help with your landscape design, or these things, brush removal, grading, and trenching, and so on. There are some professional services listed on page 19 through 21 in the Xeriscape Landscaping with Style book. And it's online. There's the address, landscapewithstyle.com. And if you're searching for landscape plant choices, this is a great booklet. It's also online, or you can get it in hard copy. Now, this is on your reference list, so you don't need to write this down. And irrigation, this landscape watering by the numbers this should be like a little landscape go-to guide. It has a chart that shows you how much to water depending on the size of the plant. It has another table that shows you how often to water depending on what type of plant you have and what the season is. So it's set up as an ebook on the Water Use It Wisely site. Or it also comes in hardcover. And this one, I want to point this out. This is a book that was created by the city of Scottsdale, and the conservation officers share information. So this is something that we gladly encourage you to look at. This was a revitalization workbook that they created for their their old residential area in sort of South Scottsdale. Here's the address, but it's also on your reference sheet, scottsdale.gov/asset and so on. But it not only has some graph paper inside and some other information, but it has a series, I think there are either 6 or 8 landscape plans along with the plants that are included. So this is like having your own architect draw up a landscape plan for you. This one's called Birdiescape. They have one called the Colorscape and Easyscape. And so there's, I think, like 6 or 8. So I would recommend that you take a look at this and see if it might be helpful for you. This one, as you might notice, even includes a little bit of lawn area. So here's a close-up of the landscape drawing. So I thought that might be helpful. Now, you might also want to take a look at this website, which is ChandlerWaterSavingPlants.com. And I'm going to exit out of the program here for just a minute since it's 10:22. I want to just show you this site because it has such powerful information. So I'm going to stop sharing. Maybe I'm not doing this right. Oh, here we go. Stop sharing. All right, and I'm going to switch to the website. All right, so okay, now I think I got it. Now you should be able to see the WaterWise landscaping homepage. Maybe. Am I doing this wrong? Am I doing it wrong? Okay, help is coming. I'm trying to show them this one.
Where's the?
Oh, got it. Firefox. Okay. All right. Okay. Now I think we're in business. Sorry about that. Technology is great when you know how to use it. So here's the website, and now this has at the very top is the are the directional tabs. So you can go to landscape tours and it'll show you about 20 different images of each of these landscapes. And I'm just going to use the first one since it's right there. They gave them names. So this is called Creative Entry Garden. And some of the plants are identified. Here we go. I'm looking for my navigation. There we go. Next. So they've used a little fence to give a little, like an arbor for their vine there. And they've used some color in the form of paint. Okay, I'm going to exit out of this and go to another one. How about this one, Desert Serenity? So this one has a little gate, garden bench. And as I mentioned, some of the plants are identified. It gives more detail. I'm going to go back to the main menu. And if you go to the landscape gallery, this one gives you examples of different landscape elements. So there's front yards and backyards, patios. This was actually some of the images that we had in the presentation. So this might give you more inspiration or ideas on what you can create in your own landscape. There's also one for, go to the next. Here's one for wildflower gardens. And I believe there's one for pathways. Yes, walkways, entryways, dry creek beds, and so on. So you kind of get the idea. It gives you lots of great photos and information on various landscape elements. If you like something, well, there's also, of course, a plant selection button too. And if you find you like something, you can add it to what's called My List. And at the end, you can print this list off and take it with you when you go to the nursery. So I hope that gives you just a brief introduction to this powerful tool. Okay, now we're back to our presentation. And don't forget that there's much more information available from both the City of Chandler and the Town of Queen Creek on their water conservation websites. So I hope you have some time and take a look at what's available there. This is also on your reference list. And we want to thank you for joining us. If you have questions, you can send those to Drew, and he will make sure that those are answered. And I really enjoyed being your presenter this evening. I can't wait till we're able to do this face-to-face, but in the meantime, I hope you picked up a few tips, and thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathy, for an outstanding presentation. And thank you, everyone, for attending the workshop today. There was one question that actually just came in. Is there a list of plants that are non-toxic for pets?
There is the University of Arizona has a list. I would just do a Google search for non-toxic plants or toxic plants for pets and include University of Arizona. I know they have one. I don't know that, of course, the address right off the top of my head, But if you can't find it, in the meantime, I will send that link to Drew, and maybe you can send it out to the entire class.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So thanks again, Kathy. And thanks again for everyone attending today. Here you'll find the City of Chandler and the Town of Queen Creek websites for more information, resources, and our contact info is listed here. When you close out of the WebEx event today, you will receive a short survey about today's class. Both Chandler and Queen Creek would appreciate it if you would just take a minute to complete it, so we can use it to improve our classes in the future. Thank you again, everyone. Hope everyone has a great weekend.